Hello, I'm MC Toon, the worst rapper in the world, and tonight is a flat earth debate or talk or chat with Tim Ozman from the Infinite Plane Society. Greetings, Tom. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, McToon, and hello to everybody there in the chat. I also have people on my end at the Infinite Plane Radio channel who are also listening, and I invited them over to your chat, so hopefully your mods don't treat them too roughly at first.
I told them be careful. We encourage people with other opinions, and we discourage abuse. So that's our kind of the thing. So I got a couple super chats I should go through quickly before they go away and before we get into it, and then I'll let you introduce yourself. But Alyssum says Toon uses money to buy a flurf with flat earth evidence. Other than that, my offer to teach flatties to fly got extended to December 2022. So Tim, from Alyssum, he has a invitation for you to come down to Australia. He will teach you how to navigate and to lay out a course in a plane and bring you on a flight. Would you accept that?
100%, I would accept that. In fact, I don't know why a regular Globe believer wouldn't play dumb to accept such an offer, but no, I would accept it in good faith.
That's good. All right. Well, there you go, Alyssum. You've got a taker for sure. I know you had a couple, maybe, but there's one. And now Harry7 says a little something to celebrate the birth of my baby girl this morning. So happy birthday to Harry7's baby girl. That's awesome. Congratulations on that. So Tim, why don't you let people know who you are a little bit, and then maybe for your side I'll let people know who I am. Go ahead.
Great, excellent. Okay, so my starting point for entering the whole conversation, even questioning the shape of the world, actually is from a broader perspective of questioning a lot of things about media itself and the world we live in, and just how mediated it is, and what that actually means as far as our perception of reality. So I've already been a skeptic about many things. So I came into this topic and I differentiated myself and the group of people around me. We kind of took the conversation slightly away from where it was already somewhat entrenched, which is it was kind of based around the idea that the world as we know it is pretty much the same size, it's just flat with a dome over it, and that this is somehow substantiated by the Bible. And I thought, well, if you're going to reject what's been established, you can't just throw in anything without first establishing this with evidence. So I didn't like the idea of proceeding as though there were a dome, and those who pushed the dome the hardest were the least interested in going to the edge to see if there actually was one. So I said, let's just go with infinite possibilities, infinite until proven otherwise. And let's look at this as, what other reasons could there be other than the biblical reason that they give, which is science is trying to hide creation. They're trying to hide God, and that's why they're hiding the dome. And I'm suggesting that if there's anything to this topic, the only thing I can understand that would make sense to me, as far as the why would they hide it? Why would there even be a deception? Is well, they'd be hiding more land, more resources, something that is tangible. I don't think the other ideas made sense. So again, infinite plane society just posited here that it's probably more land. And that was the starting point. And again, it's coming from a place of great skepticism regarding media in general. And so it's not 100% in line with many of the flat earth proponents or the people who even delve into this topic that you're used to speaking with. In fact, many of them I think would be categorized as anti-science, and that's something I try to reject. I don't think it's an anti-science proposition to differentiate between science and establishment science. So that would be my starting point here.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, before we get into anything, I'll, if you don't mind, I'll introduce myself to your people. And my wife just poked in and said it's raining here. It's been 95 degrees and humid, and now all that humidity is coming down. I'm MC Toon. I'm not actually a rapper. You don't want to hear me rap. It's I like a lot of people, I stumbled into flat earth because YouTube suggested me some videos, and I'm like, that's silly. I looked into it, and I set aside everything that I figured out before, and said, well, let's look at it from nothing. And I'm like, well, the sun would never set. Did some math, did some geometry. Yeah, that could never happen. Tested a bunch of other things, including personally measuring the radius of the Earth 4 times with friends on different places on the Earth, and confirmed that the elevation of the sun doesn't work for flat Earth, but it does work for the globe, and the radius works for all of us. We measured the same radius. So that's my position. I do debates every week on Tuesdays, usually on flat Earth, but I also invite 5G, anti-5G sympathizers to debate. They rarely do. Don't know why they don't, but they're extremely vocal too. In fact, I just had a video that came out today. I'm suspecting that there is a lawsuit in England that has raised 150,000 pounds, and I think it's kind of a sham. Could be wrong, but I'm very suspicious of it. So
Well, let me ask you this on the 5G thing. Do you think that there's a strong crossover between 5G phobics and flat earthers, or is it kind of spread between globers and
I
5G?
think the majority of flat earthers are also anti-5G, but the anti-5G movement is much larger than flat Earth.
Fascinating. Okay. I mean, my take on it, and this really goes for everyone that I pretty much speak with on this topic, is that there seems to be a lot of very popular fears and phobias that are really easy, I think, to sensationalize. And yeah, these things, conspiracy candy. And yeah, sure, it does get picked up with a lot of conspiracy theorists or quote flat earthers. But what we're doing with Infinite Plane Society is we're putting everything in the category of fake until proven real. And that goes for mainstream news and its extraordinary claims and the extraordinary claims of so-called conspiracy theorists. So I don't just say, well, I don't trust the news, so therefore everything that's being peddled by Alex Jones is therefore legit. No, I'm suggesting that if anything, most, if not all of the alternative media is actually controlled opposition to what's really going on. But with the 5G topic, you're right. And I coined the term 5G phobic because I thought, hey, look, this is being used probably to shut down your YouTube channel for being a danger to society. Because at the time when it became a popular theory in 2020, it was because people were correlating it with the pandemic. And even InfoWars made that correlation, which I find that baffling. And I thought that was an easily debunkable superstition. So I'm not with the 5G phobia. I know many people seem to think there's some kind of mass extermination agenda going and they're going to use human bug zappers, but I don't think that's the way they would do it if they were going to do it.
It's a rather complex way to do it, much more complex than any Bond villain would ever think of.
Right. Now, to get back, you said the sun would never set when you look
Yes.
into these flat Earth videos. So that's coming from a presupposition that the sun is 93 million miles away, has all the qualities as described, and the Earth is a relatively small disk taking all the light at once because it's basically a coin. It makes perfect sense. But you know now that the nobody who promotes the idea of a flat Earth accepts the idea of a distant sun. Everybody says it's local, although no one has a definite distance. And I'm disappointed as well at this idea that some people will say 3,000 miles and they won't qualify it. I don't like many of these things that are just more or less. Um,
Well,
well, I
they didn't get it from nowhere. They got it from measurements, very narrow and specific, like cherry pick measurements, but they did get it from there. So for example, when I measured it and I hypothesized that the Earth is flat and the sun is local, on both solstices, I'm in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and the 45-degree north latitude runs through Minneapolis. So my angle to the sun at local solar noon on the solstice, the equinoxes is 45 degrees. And it's over the equator on that day. Well, I'm 3,105 miles away from the equator. So if you have a 45, 90, 45 triangle with one side at 3,105, the elevation of the sun then is 3,105 miles. So right there, that's where you get it. And if you look at Robotham, he's the one that I think came up with the first actual number for it, and he gave about that number too. And he's in England, was in England, and he would have gotten a similar measurement. But when my friend in Israel measured it on the same day, he got a very different number. And when my friend in Norway measured it on the very same day, he got a very different number. So on the same day, the sun is different elevations for flat Earth, which doesn't work.
Now, what do you think about the flat Earth concept of how the seasons are explained by a sun making an increasingly wider circle closer towards the quote outer ring and then back, just period, every 6 months, north and then south? Does that explain the seasons in your perspective, or do you understand how that model would?
I understand the claims, but there's many problems with it. Like, if you can imagine, if we could, do some suspension of disbelief for a minute and imagine that the sun could set, the angle of the sunset doesn't work for any of those positions at all, but especially fails south of the equator in December, for example, because if the sun is doing circles around the North Pole, then its sunrise and sunset azimuth would be 45 degrees north of north of east and north of west when you're south of the equator. Approximately, depends how far south you are, but it's actually south of east and south of west, so it's drastically off. It's 70 to 90 degrees off of the prediction. It very much fails to predict the angle, even
Now, when you say
remotely close.
it fails to predict, now are you treating the AE map as a quote flat Earth model, even though it's
It's the most popular one. And if you say, if somebody says the sun goes around the North Pole, I don't know what other map you might suggest. I know that like Anthony and Antonio Subarats has a slightly different map than the AE map, but it's very much the AE map. If you look at it, it's just he's shuffled things around a little bit.
Well, that's an important point though, because like there isn't a flat Earth model that you can say, and so you can't just take the
Yeah.
AE map and stick it under a dome and say, hey, look, this competes with the globe on equal grounds. This is an equally valid claim, and this is, I think, one of the problems with it is the starting point is asserting things to be equal, or as you probably understand, many of the arguments asserting things that haven't yet been validated or tested in any way, and then reverse engineering from there, like the
Yeah.
dome claim. Now, what's your explanation for the dome claim when they say you can't have a pressure gradient without a lid? I mean, is that what is that what you always hear?
Oh yeah, it's very common. And so they typically say you can't have a vacuum adjacent to a pressurized system. And I just say, well, that's a straw man. We don't claim that there is a perfect vacuum. We claim there's an area of lower pressure. And you can easily measure that and see it in many different ways. Like a flat earther has done sent up a balloon and included a barometer on the balloon, and the air pressure at ground level versus the air pressure at about 120,000 feet, it's about 1% of the pressure at ground level, right? So it's already lost 99% of the pressure, and it's only gone up 120,000 feet. You go another 120,000 feet and well, there isn't a whole lot, there's not any much left to lose. You just keep going and the pressure keeps getting lower and lower. It never reaches a perfect vacuum. It's just less.
So that was my understanding of it. So when I looked at this and I looked at this various quote concepts of it, I won't say models necessarily, but there's always this concept referring to the dome, the firmament, and I've always found that to be somewhat problematic because it's like putting the cart before the horse here. We'd have to know, well, if there's a dome, is it higher in the middle? Does it curve? Where does it touch the ground? What is it made out of? And then what's on the other side of it? And if you go full Bible on this thing, well, then you're stuck with domed flat earth on top of a footstool, which is somehow underwater, which makes very little sense to me that you need a footstool underwater. So that model is not a complete model, and I don't think the Bible and its 200 verses support this thing. And so, what am I thinking? Just this is why I started the Infinite Plane Society from the very beginning, is that the biblical model itself, if anything, is probably just controlled opposition to the truth, if there is any truth in this. In other words, putting an anti-science, pro-religion spin on what might just be a question about massive mind control and fraud. And this is where we get into the topic of NASA and the space agencies
Well,
and what they
do
provide.
you think, when you say that, do you think that there was a 2,000 to 4,000 year controlled opposition, or do you think just the modern interpretation of it?
I think the modern interpretation of it as it promulgated on YouTube was like a containment operation, and let's contain it
Okay.
with conferences, quirky religious people with questionable backgrounds, and then let's just put a lid on the whole question because it gets people questioning establishment science at a very
Okay.
deep level.
All right. I'm watching the chat and people are confused because most flat earthers by far are religious flat earthers. And so, Tim, maybe you could explain your position a little better for the audience.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. For one thing, the mass media has misrepresented the conspiracy theorists, which now they call you a conspiracist because they can throw racist into the word. It's nothing but smears from the mainstream media. And they want you to think that anyone who questions establishment science, from global warming to the claims of NASA, are somehow anti-science, religious nuts, and regressives. And I'm saying that no, you're actually in a religion and in a cult if you believe everything from establishment science without actually knowing why you believe it. So, I mean, there's followers on both sides. And I think that the way they've mischaracterized the flat earth topic has been intentional in order to throw people off so they don't actually think about what we're actually bringing up here, which I find many people don't. I find it very difficult to get staunch globe defenders to really take a real hard look at some of the questionable things, just a few of the things provided by NASA. And I'm not saying that if the moon landing was a hoax, the Earth is flat. I'm not making that argument. However, I think there are enough holes to be poked in the drama regarding the space program, global warming in general, that having complete faith in establishment science, I think, is a very culty way to think. And so, no, I don't think it's a religious question. I don't think it comes from the Bible. I think it comes from radical skepticism.
I think it's funny. We have a flat earther in the chat, effed up world, who is a biblical flat earther. If I'm right on that, if I'm wrong, effed up world, correct me. But he doesn't disagree that we went to the moon. And he thinks there are satellites in orbit but not orbiting. I don't know. But also that the Earth is flat. So it's kind of all over the place.
That's problematic for a few reasons.
Oh, no
So,
kidding.
for a few reasons, but okay, so yeah, the satellite thing, I understand that, but the moon landing itself, I'm suggesting is a major psychological operation, a hoax, and I don't think it was simply to trick the Russians. Because if it was a hoax, and I'll just maybe it wasn't, but if the moon landing was fake, it would imply that the Russians were in on it, that the space program itself is an international war against humanity itself. It's not separate countries and their space programs. Important to keep in mind if they do have space wars. If China shoots down our space station, I'm suggesting it's rigged. It's not really anything other than, like I said, war. It's the elite consolidating their power. I don't believe that there's any real division above.
Who are the elite?
Well, when I say elite, okay, so I'm positing here that in order for the entire world to be under such a deception, it would imply you would have to have a controlling power elite that have a dominant influence over all media, entertainment, news, and especially over our perception of the world. And I think global warming alarmism is quite obviously a hoax. And I saw that as a hoax before I ever questioned anything else. So where are you on that, if you don't mind my asking, on the topic of anthropogenic global warming?
I it is not my strength. Um, so I don't have a strong opinion either way. It's hot here today, but I know that's not global warming. It was freaking cold in February, and I know that's not anti global warming. So I know better than to get into something that I just can't address. So somebody told me today about this. Somebody said, "Hey, you should bring this person on." I looked at this person's channel. She was all about vaccines, and I'm like, it's not my topic. So
Sure,
yeah,
sure. Well, I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go there either. I feel like that's a personal decision, and I think that too, it's a schism that they've injected into the whole topic anyway, that it's so perfectly polarized politically that I can't take it seriously. I tend to ignore that. But yeah, when it comes to the global warming topic, all I'm saying is that there is this claim that we're causing essentially a potential calamity, like a flood. And look at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Look at their logo. You got the dove over the water, and compare it to the logo of Noah from the Bible with the dove and the olive branch in its mouth. The significance here is this. The old flood myth was, if you don't change your wicked ways, God's going to flood the world and wipe us all out. But the ones who are obedient to God get inside their ark. And then when the waters recede, the dove shows up to tell Noah, you can go back. And I'm suggesting here that the global warming scenario is a modern flood myth. It's playing on old superstitions and fears, and that they've replaced the old religion for the modern atheist. So they still believe in an angry, vengeful God, but now the God that they believe might flood the world because of our wickedness, which is our fossil fuel usage, is the globe. I think that we're living in a massive doomsday cult. And that's why I think that the globe as a construct itself, I think, has been kind of turned into a replacement for God.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe it's not, look, maybe it's not the
I
same
don't
topic,
see
but look,
that. Yeah.
here's what I'm saying. I mean, maybe you don't like being told I think you're in a cult, or that the globe worldview, the dominant view, like heaven is something that's always been contested. Various religions have various ideas of what heaven is and how to get there, different concepts of what constitutes a sin. And so, what I'm suggesting is that the world now has a unifying religion that all of the other religions agree that this concept of heaven is one we can agree upon, and that would be outer space. We all have a concept of sin we can agree upon, and a sin that we all have to mitigate, and that would be our carbon footprint, our original sin. And I think they've even introduced other elements from these old religions to control the masses under the guise of science. So I'm just suggesting that science has largely been hijacked for mind control, as has media. And I think the globe is an extension of this.
So can you not confirm things yourself?
Well,
Can't you?
of course we can, but look,
Okay.
the thing is, when it comes to space and the claims from space in particular, we're in a very odd position of, we don't have anyone that I can't just go verify it for myself. And we're kind of trusting them quite a bit. We have to trust quite a few people to tell us what's going on from up there, which is fine. And I had no issue with that until I started seeing green screen glitches, little flaws in their presentation that kind of suggested to me that no, the space station is a movie set. And until someone can explain that away, everything's up for
Well,
grabs.
yeah. Have you seen the entire 1 hour long uncut video from this ISS?
Yeah, great comedy. Yeah. Now, but it doesn't pass the fakeability. Now, here's something. Look, I don't want to be just dismissive of it, but I'll say this. I have something I call the fakeability test. Is it fakeable by today's standards, production value wise? Could it have been faked? And if it could be faked, we can't rule that out. And I have many examples of things. So, again, if the space station is a hoax, it doesn't mean the Earth is flat. Earth could very well be a ball, and maybe they're hiding something else. But I don't think there's enough to substantiate the existence of space travel the way that they
Okay.
posit the whole thing.
But you can see the ISS. You can photograph it yourself. You can see how fast it moves. How is that done? You can do that yourself. People have done that themselves.
Right. And that's often brought up, and I've looked into this quite a lot. And, this is an issue. I'm glad you brought this one up, because we have the ISS transits, which, as you know, it passes the Terminator, it goes into the shadow of the Earth because it's only 280 some miles up. And so you catch it near dusk, or you catch it near dawn when it's still reflecting the sun. And so, yeah, I understand that. And you can use the app and you can, spot it when it's supposedly there. I don't think it passes the fakeability test one, as
How,
in,
all right, how could that be faked?
okay, for example, let's just take off the top of my head. I know of one particular ISS transit I can reference. It was done by the Jeranism channel, where you see the camera, the handheld camera recording the camera on the tripod. And so you can look and you can see, okay, he's pointing up at the moon. He's going to catch the ISS transiting in front of the moon. Well, he does an insert shot. So in the video, it just cuts right to the moon on a close up and the thing passes in front of it.
But
So to
but
me,
you can do it yourself, Tim.
well, so I've been told, and yes, I have tried, and I have others, but I haven't put. Look, here's the thing: it's fakeable, and I need that to be admitted first because I have found examples. Like, have you seen the Saturn transit with the ISS pass in front of the planet Saturn,
I've
and it was on NASA's website?
I've not seen that one. I've seen many across the moon, and quite a few across the sun.
Okay, well, the one across Saturn is one that made the astronomy picture of the day, and it was very impressive for a little while until it was discovered that it was a hoax, and somebody found out by kind of reverse engineering the time frame that it was supposedly taken. And so it was just kind of illustrating how easy it is to fake it. And I haven't seen contiguous footage, which should be easy to deliver, but it's always an insert shot. What I mean is,
Well, if you're so skeptical of it, why don't you do it yourself,
well, one,
or
that's a
have
shifting.
somebody you trust do it? Because all you've is when somebody does it, you just say, "Nah, it could have been faked." Basically saying, I'm the only one that I trust to do it because nobody else could do it but me in a way that will pass my fakeability test.
Okay,
That's
here's where
essentially what you're saying.
not quite, but I know what you mean. Okay, so here's what I'm actually saying. What I'm saying is, when it comes to extraordinary claims, the burden of proof is on the person making the claim. And so I shift that burden and I'm saying, please show me your best transits. And here in 3, 4, 5 years, I haven't seen anything that looks like anything other than clip art. And I'm still looking for a convincing transit, and I know that they're fakeable. So then another thing you could say is Starlink satellites. Why don't you just go look up and see Starlink satellites? Well, let's say you do see them. Could it be faked in another way? For example, you can find footage of Starlinks at 11:30 at night or whatever, and it's like they're glowing up there. Well, could that be done by drones? Do we have to necessarily say if we see lights, it therefore means that these are orbiting routers at 17,000 miles per hour, in outer space, reflecting the sun? And I'm saying the answer is they would like us to believe that, but I don't think the evidence
But
stands
now,
substantiated.
here's the thing: the extraordinary claim now is that these drones could be doing it, but they need to be doing it all over the world, like in South Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and South America. They need to be doing this everywhere because people have seen them all over the place. And they need to be drones that are moving really, really fast.
Okay, that's an interesting point
That's an
about the speed.
extraordinary claim.
I ran into that one as well. I thought about that quite a bit, about you couldn't possibly do this because anything going that fast in Earth's atmosphere would clearly it wouldn't look like these little lights gently moving across the night sky. And I don't think we have any craft that could meet those transit points at that time. So you'd have to say, okay, it's therefore in space. But I did find something pretty interesting. It was the 1955 Air Force geophysical year satellite program called, quote, Needle in the Sky. And what they did is they quite convincingly simulated low Earth orbit satellites using flashlights and airplanes. And they did this simulation for the benefit of several thousand volunteer astronomers on the ground. And so this was a year before Sputnik. So before Sputnik, they already proved that no, you can actually replicate the apparent trajectory of low Earth orbit using flashlights and airplanes. So I'm saying, no, you could do it with drones. I would think it would be easy to replicate it.
But the cost, they'd have to do it everywhere. And they put up new satellites about every other week. They're putting up another set. The cost of the fakery, plus people are actually getting service from Starlink now. How are they faking the service from Starlink in addition to the incredible challenges of faking these these drones somehow for, everywhere in rural areas and all that. How is that happening?
It wouldn't have to be continuous drones everywhere. It would just have to be in key places where they have maybe they tell people, hey, look, like in Seattle, hey, look outside. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that
They
we saw.
don't tell people. You can actually go to a website, put in your location, and it will tell you when it'll send you an email when it's going to be near you when you can see it anywhere in the world.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm well aware of this. And look, I'll say this too. I have an app, or there is an app you can download for your phone, and it'll tell you, yeah, there's a Pokemon in the dumpster behind your house. It doesn't mean there's a Pokemon there. I mean,
Yeah, but
I'm
you can
suggesting,
see the satellites with your own eyes. You
you
don't
keep
see
saying
you
you.
don't. Yeah, you. I'm talking Tim Ozman. You can do it yourself. Anybody can do it themselves, and there are thousands of people that have recorded video of it.
See, this is clever. It's clever, and I understand that because there's a point where if you don't do it for yourself, you're making an argument from ignorance, and you don't get many of those. You can say, I don't believe it, but if it's that easy, then yes. And I do have, in fact, there was a time last year where there's a group of us who were, especially my friend in New Jersey, was constantly trying to see the ISS using all these the websites and the ISS tracking site. And the thing is, he would often see lights, but it would be like, well, it's ambiguous. And I think what people do is they make this non sequitur argument of, well, there should be a light there. So I'm gonna look. And if I see any light at all, I'm just gonna say it was probably the ISS. And I think that's kind of what we have seen here. I think it's mostly hearsay. Have you personally laid your eyeballs on the ISS? And when was the last time you did so?
You wouldn't take it, Tim.
I
You
will.
will
I'll
only
take yours. I'll take yours.
No, you will only accept it from yourself. You've established that because I can point you to a bunch of other people that have done it, and I could bring them into the call here, and you would still not accept it because you didn't do it yourself.
No, I got a friend in Seattle who actually, I tweeted, I said, hey, look, they tweeted, they say the thing's going to be over at 9:05 p.m. or whatever. And he went out and he recorded and he said, yeah, I see a light. It could be a plane. So I have had people show me stuff, but I'm still at, well, does it necessarily mean it's a spacecraft? This jalopy up there, supposedly 20 years on this perfect orbit. I mean, it's beautiful if it's real. If it's real, it's legitimately incredible. But look, bubbles in space,
How's it a jalopy?
a jalopy. How's it? There's a few. They just replaced the solar panels on the thing. They're about to bring
Yeah.
it down. I think it's a jalopy. I think they've already planned to bring it down.
Plan to bring the ISS down?
I think they're phasing it out. Aren't the Russians leaving the thing? There was a hole in it last year they couldn't figure out.
Well, they did figure it out. They plugged it.
Yeah, with their finger at first.
Yeah.
The cosmonaut did, which I think is hilarious. But anyway, the other day, celestial
Hold
immunity
on a
is the
sec.
mission.
Let's That's not that big of a deal.
No, I know it's not. I'm poking fun at the thing because the other day it's out there and it has this arm, which you know, if it's a 32-foot arm, and right above the elbow, a piece of space junk punctures a hole in the thing.
Yeah.
And I called it. I said, we're going to see, because it was just, you can see it in the news. They keep hyping space junk. It's like eventually this thing's going to get hit. So it gets hit right above the arm. And I thought, well, that's funny. It gets a shot in the arm, and the mission is called celestial immunity. So you could call that a coincidence. And I'm saying, look, I'm saying this is deep level mind control.
Did a magnet stick to it?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We could talk about that for a minute.
All right, hold on a sec. But before we go on, I got a bunch of super chats here and a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, by all means.
Okay. Mike Billars, well, it's not much of a question. He's like, it's 2021. The Earth is a globe, dude. Find a hobby that's worthwhile. Maybe try TIG welding. Have you tried TIG welding for Mike Billars?
I'll look into it. Thank you.
What? I don't know. I can do. I've done the where you have the stick and you do welding with that. I'm terrible at it. Have you ever done that? Is that TIG welding? I don't know.
No, that would be, no, I know what you're talking about. TIG welding, gas.
I've done wire feed where there's a thin wire and argon gas goes around it. That's easy, but that tap and it sticks and I'm crap.
Well, I know some flat earthers who are very accomplished sculptors and also
Welders?
Welders. Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, so there's let's see. Stringer News 1 does MiG-25 welding.
Oh, and remember, I know
arc weld. I can do arc welding. That's what I do.
No, look, there's this idea out there that people who reject the globe are somehow coming from a place of abysmal ignorance, or they're really dumb, and there's some kind of cognitive error or flaw in them, or they're crazy. But the truth is, I've talked to crazy people, and you talk to any, and I don't mean to use the
I've
word crazy, but
I've
you
talked
talk
to
to any,
crazy people.
you do, and most people who are legitimately ill in some way or something, um, are not going this, they're not even thinking about alternative cosmography. They're all globe believers. And for that matter, all of the, you know, terrorists and murderers and cannibals and bank robbers and thugs have all been globe believers, as far as I know. So you can't mischaracterize
There've
flat earthers
there
as the
there've
bad.
been a few. There've been a few. The guy from the Biblical Flat Earth Society, he got himself in some trouble.
Yeah, there's been a few bad apples, but comparatively, flat earthers actually
I
have a
would
pretty clean
I
slate.
I would ask, maybe we look at percentages, but yeah, I don't think that's necessarily a large enough sampling. Maybe. Okay, but so we got Kyle Brostler says, "Oh man, he's deep into the conspiracy." But now you're not into the 5G or the magnet on the arm.
Correct. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
the magnet on the arm test, yes, magnets stick to stupid people. No, I'm just kidding. I was making that joke because Twitter was just awash with a bunch of people who I think are crisis acting for TikTok views and Twitter views, where they're just like, look, the magnet's sticking to me. And no, there's really no correlation here. It's just grasping at straws, where the anti-vaxxers have gone from certain extremes to they're making these claims that now it's like you walk by your fridge and the fridge door is going to slam open and spill a beer on the floor. It's like, no, you're not magnetic. There's nothing you can inject that would make you magnetic. And if there was, the body mod people would already have figured it out. They would have
No
probably
kidding.
used, they'd be selling that as a thing.
Well, I had a guy on a little bit ago who has had magnets in him, like fingers, I think, or in here. He's like it's encased in something. You can feel it. So, all right. Robeep says, shout outs to effed up world. That's the flat earther that thinks we went to the moon. I think he's wrong, but damn if he isn't one of the most pleasant people. He is. Now, do you think that he might be controlled opposition?
No, but there is this phenomenon of, like they say, if you're not um, anti-racist, you're part of the problem. Like they have these ways of framing things, where it's like not everybody's controlled opposition, but if you go with the flow and you reinforce it, if you're not aggressively against the deception, then yeah, you're pretty much complicit, controlled opposition by default. Stooge. I wouldn't go so far as to say
So,
useful idiot, but
so maybe in that general category of Venn diagram where useful idiot would be in the middle, and then around it would be something other than useful idiot. That
enablers,
and okay, all right.
globe
Okay.
enablers. And look, this is the
But
thing too.
but
I
all right,
don't
but
want
you think all right. So you think that people that aren't actively part of controlled opposition but are just going along with it are globe enablers, and I mean flat earthers that go along with the flat earthers that are controlled opposition. This is complicated, Tim.
No, it's really not. What I'm saying is that you have worldview warfare going on. You have the mainstream worldview, which is the one that comes out of the TV and doesn't get censored, the one that's going to be in Wikipedia and the history books, the one where everything's real and none of these things were psyops. Okay, that's the mainstream view. That's the worldview that most people share. Now, if you jump off that worldview, you find all kinds of distortions of it, where it's usually scarier. Like it's this plus chemtrails, this plus blood eating or blood drinking elite. So you have these other stories that I think are meant to scare people back into mainstream, and those would be the controlled opposition. Like Alex Jones, I consider him to be mainstream. What I really do, I consider him to be alt media, and he's just part of the mainstream apparatus. In other words, he's meant to exist in order to fill in a certain role. Like he's the boundary. What he says is the edge, and he vets it. If he doesn't go with anything that challenges establishment science, his listeners won't. He's a very solid gatekeeper who believes in the moon landing and everything else. He believes in the secret space program.
And he's controlled opposition.
I would say so, 100%. Alex Jones, here's why. He reinforces the idea of continuous false flags by these bad actors, and false flags as in Group A blows up this building and blames group B for their own gain or whatever. And all these people died, but not for the reasons that the mainstream thinks. So I'm suggesting that that's actually controlled opposition. It's not the truth, because I think the truth is actually much further than that, which in my opinion, my truth, and this, I'm just going to say this without, I don't want to get your channel in trouble. I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but I'll say that 98% of the news is probably fake. It's not that they're false flags. It's that most of these events are literally fake, agitprop. And this is where I said that the question of the flat earth is really a question of, how much do you trust the world of you that you've been given, that's been curated for you? And I'm saying Alex Jones is part of the curation process. He's to keep you from straying too far.
He's fringe still, but and I don't like Alex Jones for the opposite reasons that you don't. But okay, let's get a couple more here. Toby says, "Hey, Toon, you have by far the most calm demeanor of all debunkers. However, being confronted by their stupidity so much, do you secretly scream inside?" I, I, I don't. Tim, I'm not screaming inside at you right now.
Well, I'll tell you this. Look, I'm willing to be proven wrong. Look, I will. I mean, I follow up with all this stuff. I will not stand by anything that I think is just meant to keep the conversation going or protract it if it doesn't merit it. Like, for example, I get calls from people all the time who say that there are these go fast rockets that hit the dome or go into some kind of firmament, or they go up into some magical realm where they hit the ether and they spin the other way. I hear all kinds of strange things about it, but there's a perfect explanation, I imagine, for why this go fast rocket would come to a stop. And I figured it had something to do with the parachute. But
It's a yo-yo D-spin mechanism.
and why don't you explain how that works? Because
Okay.
people are under the impression that this thing mysteriously stopped and hit a barrier. And
So,
again, this is one of the things that I'm trying to get past.
when you shoot a rocket, here's your rocket. If anybody did model rockets, in order to keep it from wobbling, you have fins on the bottom, right? But when you go higher, those fins don't do as much because the air pressure is significantly less. So you can't steer it, or at least keep it going in one direction very well, because the fins don't do much. So what they do is they intentionally spin it. So the fins are slightly turned to the one side, all of them, so that as it's going up through the air, it gets this really fast spin going. Then when there's less air, so that the fins aren't doing much, it's still spinning. So the gyroscopic force is keeping it pointed in the same direction. But now you can't do a whole lot of things while spinning really fast. So when it gets near apogee, near the top, it has a 2 or 3 or 4 weights on these big cables, and they release them. And so it's spinning really fast, and then these weights go out to the end, and it significantly slows down the rotation. So if you've been on a merry-go-round, the kind that are now illegal, right? But if you're on the outside of it and you're holding on, like leaning back, and then you pull yourself to the middle and you climb to the center of that merry-go-round, it's spinning really fast. And then you go back to the outside and it slows down again, right? That's constant angular momentum. So they release these cables, they go out to the ends, it slows down the spin, and then they actually cut them and they fall down. And in some of the videos you can see the cables with the weights falling. So that's why it stops spinning. But you can tell in the video it still spins. It doesn't actually stop spinning. It's still spinning, number one. Number two, it continues to go up. And if you keep watching the video, you can see the orientation of the rocket eventually turns and near the top, and you can see the horizon more instead of just pointing down. That's what's happening. It's well understood, and it's part of the design of the rocket.
Right. And the ironic thing though is that the arguments that are being put forth like that are there to reinforce their belief. And so it's a belief first, and whatever reinforces it. And I see that that video shared and reshared. and it won't go away. And I'm like, well, there has to be a definitive stopping point for some of these things so we can actually talk about what is actually valid about this question. And I think the question that still it does have, it's something of a can of worms here. There's a lot of questions that I think are raised when you look into some of these claims. Like, well, let me ask you this really quick. UFOs, disclosures later this month. Do you believe in extraterrestrials, alien saviors, higher intelligences that might come back
Um,
down?
no, in general, no. I think that there is definitely a possibility that there are other intelligent life forms based on the quantity of possibilities. I don't think that any have traveled here, and I don't think that any, if they would travel here because of the amount of technology they must have, they wouldn't get accidentally discovered.
Okay, interesting point. Uh, Now, what about the idea that they would be more likely already here, maybe under the ground or something, than further away? Which would be more likely, in your opinion? Already here, close by, beneath us possibly,
I
or
don't know.
remote?
I don't know why they would be beneath us. If they were able to get here, they would have pretty good spaceships, I would think.
Possibly, possibly. Okay, just a question. I was just curious where you went with that because the whole topic of aliens and UFOs is one of these mainstream acceptable notions because it has a veneer of, it seems somewhat scientific. Aliens have higher technology, and it seems to validate the entire heliocentric paradigm and other planets and everything else. So I'm always curious to see what people think about the UFO question. So, for example, in February of 2020, there was an object that NASA filmed, and so you obviously don't doubt the video presented from NASA. So this isn't coming from a flat earther, but there's a video from February 25th, and this is 2020, and it was a cone-shaped UFO that followed the space station for 20 minutes. And they thought it seemed like it was intelligently guided because after the 20 minutes, and when the cameraman zoomed in on it, the astronaut zooms in on this thing, it went up and it had a beam of light beneath it. And I think it was shaped like a turtle shell more than a cone. But my point is, this craft was recorded from the International Space Station's own cameras last year. And I'm like
Uh,
wondering, well, what
Well,
do you
hold
make
on a
of hearing
second.
about that?
We, it's a little confusing coming from you because you think that this is all faked.
I do. But
Okay.
if you believe that all
So
of their
yeah.
footage is real, you're sort of stuck having to believe in
Oh,
that, aren't
okay.
you?
I've not seen that. I would love to see it. So and maybe you could send it to me and I could review it
Oh yeah, I will. I mean,
a
the
different
title
time.
of
I
the
would love that.
article is a different time, but the title is NASA Films Mystery UFO Following the Space Station for 20 Minutes. And I just bring this up because it's sort of a challenge. It's like, well, if we don't have a point, if these guys, if their integrity is impeachable, if they're only presenting us scientific evidence with their video footage, then we have to assume that A, the whole thing's a big film production, or B, UFOs are real. And I'm curious to see if you're now a believer.
I found it. I'll look at it different time,
It's a different
I
topic. I
guess.
get it.
Yeah.
I get it. It's a different topic. And again, even
So,
if,
yeah.
okay, so
All
we'll
right.
move on from there. I appreciate you
Uh
going there.
yeah, Truth Nerd says, I love this. Sounds like Tim not only subscribes to all the conspiracy theories, but he also clicked the bell. So you get notifications when new conspiracy theory videos come. Get it? Right. Okay. I thought it was funny, Truth Nerds. Kiro says, Res Rhetoric and Astronomy Live measured the height, speed, and size of the ISS. Watch their video. If you think it's fake, do it yourself, Tim. So have you seen and have you seen Red's Rhetoric and Astronomy Live's video recording the ISS transiting the moon?
I did watch that. In fact, I spoke with Red's Rhetoric, and he agreed to meet me somewhere in Texas, and we were going to actually record one of these together. We had to talk about this, and what I said was, just like if the ISS is fake, it doesn't prove the Earth is flat. Well, if we see a light, it doesn't prove the Earth is a ball. I think we're stuck with the same
Well, it's
problem here,
it's
unless
not a light when it traverses the moon. It's a non-light, right? It's a
right, you get the silhouette. Yeah, I've
it's
seen
a
those ones.
silhouette. Yeah. So you can't project darkness, right? You can only project if you're going to hologram technology isn't nearly that good, but you can only project light. You can't project a shadow. So
I would never suggest a hologram either.
yeah.
I think that's absurd. I think the most likely thing, if these aren't real, the only thing that would actually be possible, given the limitations of actual craft that could imitate that, would be an insert shot. In other words, a PNG with a transparent background, Photoshop. But that's the only way. Unless it's either real or it's Photoshop. There's no middle ground with some kind of craft simulating, except in these maybe publicized things where they might simulate it with a drone, possibly. Like there was space junk that was spotted above Seattle recently, and it's like, to me, that's a PR stunt. I think it's fireworks. I don't believe it was an actual chunk of rocket from SpaceX
Okay.
blowing up over a populated area.
So here's the deal, though. It was about the ISS transiting the moon. So it sounds like you don't believe Red's Rhetoric filmed it, because you said you've talked to him, but you think it's an inset shot, right?
I think that he's I hate to say it, but look, and I don't want to call anybody out as a shill or an operative or an agent, but I would imagine that if this is true, that we're dealing with a conspiracy of this magnitude to lie to the population about outer space, of course you're going to have agents at every level to help prop
Okay.
it up. You're going to have
So that
witnesses.
goes back to my previous point that you're the only person that you trust. Or
I would
maybe
trust-
maybe there's some other people that you would trust. So you have placed any evidence outside of what somebody else could present to you. You will only accept it from yourself or somebody that you specifically trust ahead of time. So
I have
that's
two-
that
look,
goes
no.
back to, you do it yourself. You can.
Two family members actually told me about the Starlink satellites. In fact, one of them was an
ISS.
ISS. We'll talk about the ISS, but I've had people tell me they've seen Starlink, and I've had a lot of people on the internet say they've seen the ISS, but I ask them when they call into my live stream, for example, I'll say, have you seen it? And one for example is a Canadian. His username, I believe it was, it'll come to me. He called in and he said that he saw the ISS transit over his house. He went to bed or went inside, watched TV. He said 90 minutes later, he came out and he saw it again. So he confirmed to me that he saw the transit twice that night. So I used to get a lot of calls like that. So later, it occurred to me. He told me he saw this thing once around 8, and then another time, after midnight or something. And it's like, I'm asking him, well, what time did you see it, and what time did the sun set? Because it seemed like it was too far after the sunset, where it's like he should not have been able to have seen it. It would have been in darkness. So I get a lot of false witnesses who can't substantiate it.
It's again the opposite of my point. My point is, how about you do it? You get a telescope or a camera with appropriate zoom. Get the app on your phone, or however you want to calculate when you might see the ISS. Set it up and record it and see if you get it.
Sure. Okay. How about this? Okay.
That's
about
all
this.
that you'll accept.
Okay. No, here's the thing. I will do that. I'll do it. I'll humor you, and I will get my my group of friends together, and wherever we are, and we'll make a concerted effort again to do this.
Okay.
And not only that, we'll document it. But even if I do see this light passing at that time, it doesn't therefore logically follow that the space station is real as presented, because there are too many glitches within that presentation that still have yet to be explained away. I mean, there are microphones that go through people's necks. There are people getting tripped up in harnesses that shouldn't be there. I have a collection. It's a vast collection of blooper reels. It's a blooper reel.
But what you can go after them one at a time. You can identify, okay, there is something that goes in front of the moon and it's darker than the moon. It's not light. It can't be projected, right? And then you can do something like Red's Rhetoric and not Logical Hillbilly has a super chatter coming up, and Astronomy Live did, and do parallax measurements to measure its elevation. Right? They measured its elevation independent of anybody else and got a certain 280 miles or something like that, right? So once you do that, then you start to limit the number of ways that it could possibly be done, right? If it's that high, it couldn't be a drone because there isn't enough air for a drone to fly. So then that limits it to be something other than a drone. It has to be able to fly in extremely low air pressure, right? So it eliminates possibilities, and that's a key fundamental part of science, is eliminating possibilities.
Yes, like we've eliminated holograms. And so I'm trying to eliminate the CGI possibility here, an insert shot. And again, I'm attaching this to a conspiratorial view that this is indeed a protracted psychological operation, and that this is all just a movie. And so, yes, I know that sounds, obviously it's an extraordinary claim, but I have a lot of things that I use to back this up when I'm looking at the ISS and the inside, and I do consider it to be kind of comical. And I think it's funny if it is fake, as I actually believe it to be. But I'm not going to make an argument from incredulity. I'm very, very incredulous by some of the pictures that I see of the ISS from the ground. At the level of detail, you can see the modules, you can see the little details in the solar array. You can see Chris Hadfield on his guitar at the cupola strumming his six strings. You can see that in these pictures. And I'm like, there's no way that's 300 miles.
You can't, nobody showed a picture of him in the cupola playing his guitar from the ground. What are you talking about?
It's extreme detail, though. Would you agree? It's extreme detail for that distance, for that height. You know,
Yeah, it's great detail. I don't think it's unexpected though, because we know that because, like I said, we can measure that the air pressure goes down dramatically with increasing elevation. So you don't need to get very high before there isn't a whole lot of air pressure to have air to obstruct the view of things.
Right, I get it. Exactly. You're not dealing with the same thing as lateral distance. Now, what do you think of this notion? Someone ran this by me the other day. They believe that the U2 program was
The band.
no, right, yeah, like the U2 footage from 70,000 feet. They have these high altitude footage.
Yeah.
This person on YouTube had compiled a lot of footage, and they were actually comparing it to the footage that you see from the space shuttles. And he was suggesting that NASA just appropriated the U2 program and then bent it a little bit and repurposed it and said, this is from the space shuttle. So what do you make of all these people on YouTube who are, so skeptical that they're trying to reverse engineer how they made this stuff? Like, do you think that we're all crazy? What's going to break this? What's going to stop this, in your opinion?
I think you make a good point, a good case for everybody being crazy. It's here's what I think that the in general, not to just diss you, but I think in general the conspiracist process rather than the scientific method, the process is pick your conclusion, find things that support that conclusion, no matter how tenuous it might be, and try to wrap things around it. Number 3, ignore things that contradict your conclusion. And number 4, declare that your conclusion has been undeniably proven. So somebody saying the U2 footage is what they used for the space shuttle footage or the ISS footage, that's wrapping it around to get your desired conclusion, but it doesn't address the other things, like the ability for people to actually measure the elevation of the ISS independently, completely independent of anybody else. You can do it. Anybody can do it who doesn't believe it. It doesn't account for all of those things.
Well, look, I'm with you on this. I think the wrong direction to go with this is conferences and religiosity. I don't think building a community around this helped in any way. In fact, I think it set it back.
I would. When I first heard that there was a flat Earth convention, I thought, well, wouldn't they do the same types of things that scientists do in conventions? Somebody brings up their work that they've done and the breakthrough and the newly published paper that got through the rigors of peer review. They're going to present it at the conference and move the entire thing forward. No, they don't do that. At the Flat Earth Convention in 2019 that I went to, they kicked me out, but it was just the people who have YouTube channels going and giving a in-person version of their YouTube video. That's all it was. And patting themselves on the back saying, we're so woke, we know the earth is flat. It was,
Right. That was a
yeah,
problem that I had with it in the beginning was I thought, well, you've got the attention. You could do something with this. Send somebody on a boat. And this is where I met up with the Daredevil, Mad Mike, who had this raccoon plan where he was taking this idea in a very fun way, I think, combining it with daredevilry to debunk it or prove it by taking a raccoon to the Carmen line, which was a legitimate attempt. I saw the craft and it is a legitimate way to do it. Is it survivable? I don't know. But but anyway, the flat earth convention and community there did not want anything to do with that. In fact, they were against anyone talking about going to Antarctica, going to the five gateway cities. They were actually against the exploration in the sense that they were outgrouping. So I was the one who kind of consolidated the ones who were outgrouped by the biblical cultists who formed the convention. And they did not want anything to do with people who are challenging that, which is why I kind of think the conversation's gone nowhere. They took it into anti-science and into religion, which I don't think is the proper direction.
yeah.
Because like I said before, I do believe that mainstream science, and establishment media is the de facto religion of the day. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I do think that you have a
Well,
religion, whether or not you know it.
it certainly does come that way. But um, the thing about science is that it can be independently verified and repeated, and if it's not repeatable, then it's not very well accepted. So,
So
for
when do we
example,
repeat the moon landing? When do we repeat that? It's been how many years now?
they went 6 times, but that wasn't just a science experiment. There's a bunch of things, right? But now if they go back here in a couple of years, then what are you going to say, right? You're just going to say it's fake. But
No, actually, that's the thing. If
the
they go there, it's over with, clearly, right? Why haven't they just, if it's so easy to
it's
debunk these
not
claims,
so easy. I don't know why
what
it's
I mean
not
is,
easy to go to the moon. It's
no,
really
why is
hard.
it so difficult to, why do you find it to be, like, for example, one of the new astronauts who went up to the space station, Victor Glover, he's already down. But when he was up there, he's sitting in the Dragon capsule and the window's right in front of him, and he brings out his phone so he can show us the globe. And I thought, okay, well, here's a guy who's got a smartphone. He's going to record the Earth, show us the ball suspended in space, and put this thing to rest with one tweet. And what he did is he put his camera out past the windowsill. He recorded a section of the globe, and then he flipped his phone around in a circle to make it look like a globe. And then when he put it back to his face and he said, "Words can't describe how beautiful it is," he was upside down in his camera. So I thought, they can't just give us an honest picture. There's always some kind of trickery, sleight of hand, and I want to see the whole ball floating in space. And again,
There's tons of them. There's tons. There's so many of those pictures, but you won't accept them.
no, I want to see video. I want to see video of the Earth floating in space with an astronaut with a selfie where it's not cropped up or they're not showing you a little bit here and then twisting the camera. It's always so difficult to get just a straight shot.
They do spacewalks all the time and they video them. What do you how are you I mean you ask for something and you're going to reject it.
I guess we should be more specific. I mean, I realize how at the height that they're at, they can't show us the whole ball, blue ball style. They can't show us what Starman saw us, but I'm not satisfied with what they have been showing us with their handheld cameras. I think they could do a better job, and I've been goading them for this for a long time. They won't do it, and I think they've got something to hide.
Well, they've not heard you. I got to tell you, Tim. Um, you haven't. You may have been goading them, but they've not received that goading. All right,
Hey,
let me.
I know what you mean. I mean, when I say me, I mean everyone here has been calling them on Twitter collectively. It's like we're constantly watching their uploads. I'm like, okay, look, there's a little bit of a tug from an invisible harness string. So
Well,
this
but
skepticism
that's why there's
found
the
it.
1 hour uncut video. Maybe that's why they did that.
Right, right. The 1 hour uncut video, which you accept as evidence, and this is why I brought up earlier the UFO footage from the ISS, because if we're going to accept their footage as evidence and it's real, it's not been tampered with, then whatever they show us should also be considered to be real, even if it shows UFOs. And so I'm curious to see, your response, if you do a response to that UFO that followed the ISS for 26 minutes, because I don't think that you can be consistent intellectually and say you don't believe in UFOs after seeing this thing.
I'm hoping it's ET.
And when it takes off with some kind of beam of light. It's not any kind of propulsion, so it's definitely not man-made. So either I think it's a PR stunt to convince us of Space Force, or it's to convince us of UFOs. But I mean, I take it to be fake, and
Space.
and if your standard of evidence is it comes from NASA, it's real, you're stuck with it.
Well, and it's one of many things. So let me ask you this. I measured the elevation of the sun to be from Minneapolis 3,105 miles on local solar noon on the day of the equinox. Now 12 hours later, I know how far I am from the sun, from the subsolar point 12 hours later. Okay, not a whole lot of math to figure out the angular elevation of the sun above true level, which is 90 degrees from zenith. It would be about 20 degrees above true level just 12 hours later, but it had set 6 hours before that. That's what I mean when I say the sun could never set if the earth were flat. You can test that yourself. The sun sets every day. How does the sun set?
I see what you're saying there. Interesting point. I would like to see that, but I am also of the opinion here that if this flat Earth thing is real, it would have to rule out light years, for example, and all these vast distances.
Let's stay on this though. How does the sun set?
So I mean,
because you can't have been in flat Earth for as long as you've been in flat Earth and not have thought about how the sun sets.
Oh no, I have. I still do. I mean, I don't say unequivocally I know, and it's obviously it's very problematic to just say, you know, it's 3,000 miles and it's just going out of your range of view. And there's a lot of questions that I don't have answers to. If I was gonna, you know, say precisely, you know, I know it's this high. It would have been
this simple. Here it is at noon, local solar noon. Here it is 12 hours later. This angle is still positive. It never goes negative. That angle is always positive. The sun could never set, yet it does every day.
I'll have to see a copy of that diagram for myself up close. Nice
This
work there.
diagram?
No, I'm just kidding. No, okay, look, I'm gonna follow up with a few things here,
Okay.
specifically with your ISS thing, but I want you to follow up with the UFO trailing the ISS, because I ultimately think that we're dealing with a question of hypermediation and people divorced from reality, and it may not just be people that you think are the ones who are totally off base here. Like, I do think the flat earthers have a point. Even if they're wrong about certain things here and there, I think that there is a point here when you see major league glitches and very poor explanations for these glitches, and all you get is ridicule, and that's not going to chase people away. You know, you can laugh and mock at the green screen glitches in the space station or minimize them, but I think it's an important component. And it's not just the space station, it's even the private agencies and what they're doing. There are indications that they're playing tricks on us. I mean, the thing I said about the celestial immunity and the space station getting vaxxed, that's just one example of many things that I consider to be inside jokes. But I guess we're going to have to disagree on pretty much most of these things, because you trust these things, these institutions implicitly.
I trust nobody to measure the angle of the sun. I just trusted myself to do that.
Right.
And
No,
I trusted myself when I looked outside and saw 12 hours later that the sun wasn't 20 some degrees above true level.
have you seen the ISS with your own eyes? Have you done that yet?
No,
Why not?
it's not my claim.
It's not your claim.
I don't look to that as proof that the earth is any particular shape.
Oh, that's what you mean.
That
Okay, gotcha,
that's
gotcha.
Red's rhetoric. That's his deal. He loves that, right? He's done a ton of that. That's not my, so like how many times can somebody do? He's done that. I'll do something else. I've done other things. So
No, I got
I
it. He
don't
even
I
said too.
don't
He
bring it
said,
up. Now I only brought it up because you brought it up, right? I'm
I
bringing it
got
in
you. I got
response
you.
to you.
Like
Yeah. So
you can't answer for NASA. I understand. Nor can Reds
yeah.
answer for them. We're all looking at the same material. Now, where do you think this goes, in your opinion? How much longer can this last? Why do you think it's going on? Do you think that you've solved every
I
major question here?
I think that when enough people have gone on um you know space tourism trips, right? It's becoming in the next years. It's happening, right? 8 people have paid to go to space so far. Another one is in the works right now. There's talks about Tom Cruise and his director going. I don't know. Who knows if that'll happen? But there's three companies that are working on it right now, and they're kind of in this race to get it. And it's gonna be only millionaires at first. But once there's a lot of people that have gone to space and people know, 6 degrees of separation. Once you're 2 degrees of separation away from somebody that's been to space, and when most people in the first world are that far away from somebody that's been to space, then when flat earthers say, hey, did you know the earth is flat? Somebody can say, yeah, well, my uncle just came back from space, so I don't think so.
Right. So in other
That's where
words,
it's going. That's when flat earth will not get any new adherents. I don't think that this will convince the religious ones. I
interesting.
don't know. I don't know what you might think of that. If you met 6 people that you knew well enough that said, I've been to space, Tim, it's not flat.
Well, I talked to a guy named Mark Gold, who's a Scotsman, huge fan of Star Trek, and he got tired of debating flat earthers and he put out a GoFundMe, which went viral for a minute. And he's trying to get a ticket to Virgin Galactic. And he opened up the seat to a flat earth, credible witness to flat earthers. And he asked me to find somebody that everyone would trust so they could look out the window and be that set of eyes that they would find to be trustworthy. And so I think I reached out to Jake Gibson, the flat earth a-hole, and I think he said he would do it. Quincy Carr, who's a pilot and a flat earther, said he would go. So I put
Wait,
that out there.
wait. What kind of pilot is he?
Quincy Carr is a flight instructor. You can look him up. Quincy, he calls into my live stream here and there. And okay, you might want to talk to him. In fact, I could probably get you his number.
Absolutely. I've been trying to get a pilot on.
Oh yeah, tell him that I recommended that you speak.
Okay.
He is someone who would also be willing to take that particular trip. It's suborbital, but
Yeah.
again, no, I mean, you can only move goalposts so far when it comes to this thing. But my contention, which is kind of dark, is that it's, I almost don't want to say it, where I think this is going. I mean, when I look at the whole Martian program, I see a lot of what I think is just dangerous utopianism. And I look at the idea of sustainability and what that means. And to me, the space program is more or less a a nightmare. It's the green world order. It's all the environmentalists' dreams come true, permanent lockdowns to save
I
the earth. I think
I
it's a
don't
night.
I don't think the environmentalists particularly like space exploration. It's not very green.
Well, that's a good point. They don't like the money being spent out there, but actually, no. Even Bezos says that we need to lock down the Earth, free civilization, to prevent the Earth from getting worse, and then we can go exploit other places. That it's a necessity to save the planet. But the environmentalists, of course, like Greta and Bill, are against Musk because of his capitalist leanings. But I don't think it's in principle, and I think they want to make Earth more like the way space is going to be. They want to realize that idealism down here with sustainability. I think that's where we're headed. But anyway, my opinion about where the space age is going isn't all that relevant here, other than I think it's a massive gulag system. And I wouldn't be entirely shocked if all these Hyperloop systems that Virgin Galactic and SpaceX are doing with, or Boring Company, I wouldn't be shocked if I found out that these Hyperloop systems weren't in fact tunnels to simulate space travel to send people to subterranean Mars bases. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if such a thing existed just based on um,
How would tunnels simulate space?
easy. Have you seen the new Virgin Galactic Hyperloop tunnel system. They even do a countdown. I think
Hold on,
that's
hold on.
the it
It's not Virgin Galactic. That's a different company.
Well, Virgin Galactic also has Hyperloop. Stephen Branson's company. I know it's not Virgin Galactic, but Stephen Branson's Hyperloop company. They did this test run, and I'm just suggesting that no, actually, I think it'd be easy to fake space travel. Disney does it all the time, and I think that this would be the perfect vehicle.
How do you simulate weightlessness?
Well, they take all the air out of the tunnel. I mean, read how they do these Hyperloops, and I
But
think it's very
that doesn't make you weightless.
no, but it would simulate the trip to this other place.
But how,
That's what I'm.
but
It
how do
would
you
be.
simulate how would you simulate weightlessness though?
Well, simulating weightlessness, again, I'm talking about simulating just the travel from point A to point B. But as far as simulating weightlessness, uh, I think that when they actually pull this off, it's going to probably be like it is right now. Harnesses, green screens, probably
But
better
but
CGI.
but people can't be fooled by that. Here, put this harness on. You will still feel gravity.
No, I'm saying when they ship people off to the Mars gulags deep underground, it won't matter. I think once you sign your ticket, I mean, this is just hypothetical, but I think it's more likely that you have Mars. Look, more
Mars
likely.
gulags? What are you talking about?
Okay, I'm looking at the Mars base, right? The Mars base itself is an enclosed system. I think it's a nightmarish vision. I think it looks like a commune. So, if anything, if you're going to Mars, it's a one-way trip, no more private property. You lose all concept of freedom and travel. I think it's an inversion of the
Yeah,
way we live now.
but
And I'm suggest
how would you fake that to a person? It takes months to get there.
well, I think
And
the way they're gonna
you're
that's what
weightless for months.
I think the way they're going to fake this is actually using the celestial Autobahn space manifolds. If you've looked into this, is not me. This is what I have found in just regular research. They're talking about accelerating space travel with what they call the celestial Autobahn, where it's more of an arc. They call it an arc of chaos. So the experience of deep space travel will be more like a straight trajectory, extremely fast and short to your destination. We're not talking about old school Star Trek style travel.
What- Star Trek is not old school. That's futuristic. They
Futuristic. I
in
mean,
in Star
they
Trek they travel within a solar system in just minutes.
okay. Well, then, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It'd be more like Star Trek then, not like what we're doing now, where it's long. It definitely like not like warp speed, but they call them celestial autobahns. Look them up. These arcs of chaos to take us across the solar system in seconds. And I'm saying, read the description of the arcs of chaos, the space manifolds that they use to zip you across the galaxy, and it would feel exactly like a hyperloop.
I don't think anybody is suggesting these exist. I think it's just like fantasy
I'm pretty,
ideas.
actually, no, these are, well, fantasy ideas. It's funny you say that. I mean, how much of outer space didn't just straight up emerge out of science fiction anyway? And I kind of think there's a place where the two blur. And when we're dealing with these types of ideas, I think that if they can get the public to believe it, they will make it happen. And that's where I think this is going. Now, I have no way to substantiate it, but that is where I think it's going. It's a personal theory. I think that's more likely that they will simulate space travel and dump people underground into communes before they send people millions of miles away.
Oh, you went full Q there for all right. Let's not get into that.
Hey, Q's on your side. Q says the Earth is not flat and that there is a space force and they've got technology that we haven't dreamed on. So now actually Q's on your side.
Space Force. Uh, I went to I was in Texas in March and I went to a Army surplus place and I'm like, hey, you got any Space Force stuff? And all they had was this. So, all right, let me read a couple more things here because we got way off track. Cinnamon Control says there's a time lapse from a plane of Starlink satellites coming up from the horizon and going up way higher. Maybe you want to find that. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but thank you, Cinnamon Control, for that. Oh, this is good. The Logical Hillbilly. This is what we touched on this. He says, with the upcoming era of civilian space travel, why wouldn't the keepers of the so-called lie be panicking and trying to stop them from exposing their lie by sending regular people to space?
Good question. And it's either game over for the topic if that is the case. If it's just like a matter of sending somebody up there, this would debunk it instantly because you're going to have regular people going up. But we're not quite there yet. And I think there's still a few things that could happen in the meantime if they wanted to stall it or simulate it, or build the infrastructure to simulate it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, and this is just a guess, if we saw a dissolution in international cooperation in space wars, possibly as an excuse to stall this very phenomenon. You know, the Kessler syndrome, where somebody shoots down something and then it hits something else, and then it's just too dangerous to go out into space. I mean, I think there are a number of ways they could actually stall if there is something to hide.
Time will tell. I don't like relying on civilian space travel because it's been on the verge for the last 30, 40 years. So Connell Silverfirst says the fact that something could be fake doesn't mean it is fake. You're claiming the ISS, among other things, is fake. The burden is on you to prove it.
True. I mean, it is true, but there is a couple of things here to consider. We do have to acknowledge at least that until we can solve these, we can't just move past it. Like, if the ISS is fake, it has ramifications. It means that every supply module that went up there, every rocket launch they sent up from SpaceX to send them supplies, like their monkey suits and their guitars, all those would have to be fake too. It means that all of the different nations that are participating in the ISS are in on the fakery. So it's actually a very big deal if it's not as advertised. And it would also suggest that maybe, um, well, that there's cooperation here. So like, that's why I said earlier that if we do see any kind of space wars, it would have to be farcical because they're all sharing the same backstage, the same special effects department.
Yep, I guess. All right, let's see. Ella Baca says, I watched Starlink trail an hour after launch from Chile near Antarctica, 100 kilometers away from any major city. Who would fake it here?
Good question. Good question. Very good question. Why would they fake it where there's no witnesses?
Or very few like that. Yeah, the fake would have to be amazingly elaborate because anybody can see it anywhere and the information is publicly available. So anybody that's curious could just go watch it and say, oh, there we go.
But again, we have to remember though, just because anybody could isn't an argument for something, just like you as yourself
yeah.
haven't seen the ISS
but
yourself.
as soon as somebody sees it from all these places, they all line up, all this evidence stacks up in favor of it, then at some point a reasonable person says, all right, well, that amount of fakery is unreasonably high and expensive, right?
Right. Unless, well, yeah, I guess you have a strong point there. That would be unreasonable. But now when it comes to the ISS here and these claims, I think it's important to not make claims that we don't have something substantive. And you're making claims based on the good faith of people who've given you, quote, evidence, and you haven't really seen anything to your mind to call that into question when it comes to these transits. But when it comes to the other stuff from outer space, like we'll say asteroids and all that, do you have any questions about asteroids? Do you find it unusual that we have so many reports of incoming asteroids? Oftentimes it's multiple a week, like, oh, on election day, an asteroid the size of the White House, or no, the size of the Trump Tower is going to hit the White House, or an asteroid the size of Big Ben is about to hit here. They're constantly doing this. Doesn't it seem to you like a lot of this is just drama and theater?
I think maybe you're seeing it through somebody that needs to put a headline in place, right? Because they don't. I've not seen actual like scientists saying it's the size of the Trump Tower and it's gonna hit the White House or anything of that nature. There is an X% chance of this particular thing coming near Earth. It's approximately this large. It's much less fantastical, much more banal when a scientist reports it than when somebody that needs to make a headline reports it.
No, I get it, but I mean, there's an amount of sensationalism that goes into a lot of this space stuff, which I understand. It's a good
Absolutely.
clicks,
They, yeah,
great,
they,
great clicks. But
it's clickbait.
well, let me run this by you. So in 2019, in April and May, there was something called a fictional event where FEMA worked hand in glove with NASA and the ESA to simulate an asteroid coming down to hit the Earth. And they called it a fictional event. They live tweeted about it, and they responded as though it were a real piece of, I think it was an asteroid that was going to hit us, and they responded accordingly. Well, a year later, from that drill, in May of 2020, a piece of Chinese space junk was on its path to hitting New York. Now it kept going and it landed in the ocean. But my point is, we almost had like a space 9/11 from China a year after they drilled for it. Now, 1 year later, we have this errant piece of Chinese space junk from that launch that was on April 29th,
Yep.
and it nearly put anybody within 42 North, 42 South in danger of this thing falling. And I'm looking at this as, okay, drill, close call in the news a year later, and now it supposedly almost happens. And I just get the impression that a lot of what we see in the news regarding outer space is theater. And I think it's mostly just to keep us in a certain worldview where, yeah, we
All
might
right. Well,
possibly.
all right. Let me just head that off though. Um, I write software. I work in some of the software I do. It deals with security, so I have to be up to speed on cybersecurity. And one thing that happens often is called tabletop exercises, where they'll get all the people involved, and somebody will play out a scenario, and they'll say, this is happening. A hacker is hacking this. An account was compromised here. This particular machine has gotten compromised. You can't log into it. What do you do in this? What's your plan for this? What's your plan for this? And you go through all these things to see. It's a tabletop exercise. It happens often in security. It happens very often in the military. It's expected. So if they're not doing it, then I would be very concerned, because that tells us that they're not being prepared for things like that. So I'm quite happy that they are doing it. So just because they're doing it and then something like it almost happens tells you, hey, good thing that you did it. You were prepared. So now you can go and look at your scenarios that you figured out ahead of time and apply them to see if it's going to work, or see what's necessary at this time.
Sure. I mean, ultimate vindication for their fictional event exercise, that it happened as they predicted, or almost as they drilled.
Yeah.
And then it was also China. And what I'm pointing out here, though, is that,
Well, China does it all the time. They send up rockets and they don't plan to bring them down gracefully. It's kind of a pain in the butt, right? And it's them being a bit inconsiderate.
well, that's the story. And it's a fascinating storyline here where you have, they're kind of loose with their space junk, putting us all in danger, putting the world at risk. And before that, it was now the talk about the other thing in the lab. And I'm saying these are parallel narratives, framing them as the geopolitical bad guys who are endangering everybody else, whether it's space junk or the bug. And I'm suggesting these are probably equally, uh, I don't want to use the word fake too flippantly, but I'm suggesting these are more psy-war and theater to govern the minds of the masses than anything. I don't believe in space junk Armageddon. I don't believe that it's even likely or possible, but I think that they're going to simulate it. And that's one of the reasons why I even bring this up. On my channel here, actually, months ago, I was just pointing out all of these news stories that seem to indicate that they're getting the public ready, setting our expectations for something big to fall from the sky. And sure enough, in the last few months, we've had plenty of examples of the problem of space junk being brought to our attention. And I also see it echoed in the popular entertainment. You can watch NBC Debris. You can watch the movie with DiCaprio called Don't Look Up. And I'm suggesting that there's a concerted effort to imprint the minds of the masses into this belief that we're about to face some new crisis from above. And I think that the space program is just an extension of this war. And I think it's all just a preparation, whether it's aliens or asteroids, but I don't think it's about travel to better
All right.
worlds. I
All
think
right.
that's a bunch of
Let's move on. I think we've got a great question here from Punchy. He says, can he give measurements instead of conspiratard BS? It would be nice to see from a flat earther for once. So do you have a map?
There,
You don't
the
like the
map.
AE map,
it-
but so
do I have a map?
is there an
Like
accurate map?
there isn't a flat Earth model. There isn't a map. Do you have a map? What
Absolutely, I
is
got
your
one.
model?
I got one right. I got a map right there. Right, the ONC charts. You can download them yourself for free, and you can navigate all over the globe with them
No,
accurately.
But no, there isn't like a map that is comparable to the globe. There isn't a flat Earth model. That's why I said that the debate is premature if you have a shape versus the shape in empty space, when one side is saying that they don't even accept as a presupposition the existence of space. I'm saying that
I don't
there
think it's
isn't a model.
premature. I think it's that the race didn't start because we have a map and it works and it's used constantly for navigation. And if see in science you have a hypothesis, you calculate the ramifications of that hypothesis and then you test it. Well, if the Earth is flat instead of a globe, then one of the ramifications is that the map would be drastically different. So we just go
Wait,
find
you
the
said
map.
science though. You said science, and I think it's
Yeah.
important to differentiate between science and what they show us on TV and what the
I,
fiction does to bend
this
it.
map
Because
this map isn't on TV, right?
no, what I'm saying
You
here
can
is that
navigate with this map for real with no TV involved, right?
right,
And
but
the people when somebody says, "Hey, we're going to send this ship from China full of Furbies to Australia," right? And we're going to drop off some of them there, and then we're going to continue on to somewhere else in the southern hemisphere. They need to plot out that route, and the route that the map that they use is a globe, and it works, and they get there, right? So there is an accurate map that completely relies on the Earth being a particular shape, and it works.
okay, well, you're right about that. It works. Nobody's flying off an edge. Nobody's disappearing into some unknown area that hasn't been plotted. However, I guess this is kind of where it should have gone years ago with the conference. It should have gone into what is our comparison instead of this is what the Bible says, ignore that. But still, I think you're discounting a couple of things here. And this is where the reality, where our worldview is bent by fiction, by lies, and by propaganda in, inserted into the science. For example, like I said earlier, I don't believe in anthropogenic global warming. I think it's a
Does
replacement.
it have anything to do with maps?
It does have something to do with maps, though, because the globe and the limited number of the limited amount of land, the amount of everything actually about global warming pertains to the globe model being, as they say, enclosed this size. It wouldn't work if it were larger. It would be a different set of measurements. So no, the global warming argument though is kind of parallel to this argument because it has to do with the fact that yes, science can be politicized. Science can be turned into a tool of ideology, and that's
You can't
related here.
you can't politicize a ship getting to its destination accurately using a particular map. There's nothing political about that. There's nothing political about somebody in an airplane saying, "Well, we need to get from Sydney, Australia to Santiago, Chile, and we're gonna get in the plane, we're gonna fly there. We need to make sure that the route works because when we load the fuel into the plane, we need to make sure we have enough so that when we don't run out over the water." Right? So they need to know the distances too. And the way that the distances are calculated uses spherical trigonometry. How does that work? The distances are accurate.
Well, the thing is this then. The only thing that I could possibly say to add on to this or to explain my perspective on it would be that if there is anything to the notion that the space agencies are lying about the nature of the world, it would be because they're hiding something. They're hiding land. And so what we have may be perfectly intact. All of the maps may be perfectly accurate, but I'm suggesting that does the world end where your maps end? And that's the question that's brought up with this topic. Is it 100% reliable? Are your historical records accurate? How far back do you trust your history? And I'm suggesting that
Oh,
We
I don't need to go back to trust history. You know, all we need to do is look at the accurate globe-based maps that they use and see that they work and see that there isn't an alternative, even a hypothesis from flat Earth saying this is a map that we propose to work that has not been tested and shown to be
Well,
false.
there is one that you might be interested in hearing, and I wanted to bring this up to you. I don't know if it would be of interest for you to actually dig into this, but there is someone, he's kind of anonymous, but he's put out a body of work that's really fascinating. And even if you don't agree with it, which I assume you probably won't, but if you see what he's pointing out, you'll find it to be, I think, intriguing at a minimum. The channel's called Vibes of Cosmos, and what he has done is he has this theory that one, the earth is flat, but that the moon is actually a projection in the ionosphere. And here's what he suggests, that the craters that we see aren't actually craters on a physical object caused by rocks or impacts. They're not impact craters, but he's suggesting that the moon is a projection of the ground from below. And that you look at the full moon, where it's glowing would be the areas that are just waters, and the dark areas, he said, would be the continents. Now, here's the thing. You look at the moon, and obviously there's no correlation right up the face of it, but he took a look at the top right of the moon, and he did concentrate on a grip of, well, craters, which do have a curious amount of resemblances to the known continents that we have on the globe. This would only work if you look at it as a flat projection, and it doesn't perfectly match the AE map. It has additional land masses, if it is true. But I would say this, it's either one of the most ingenious exercises in cognitive bias and bias confirmation that I've ever seen, or there are some astounding coincidental resemblances in the shapes of our continents and a certain grip of craters. It's called Vibes of Cosmos. Now, it could just be pattern recognition run amok, but it's interesting regardless, in my opinion.
Potential guy to talk to. Quincy Carr. All right.
I'll put you in touch with Quincy
Yeah.
Carr, and I'll put you in touch with, well, Vibes of Cosmos. I don't know, but there's another individual who expounds on his work who might talk to you about this. But again, that's the only thing that I've ever seen that has come close, I think, to a cohesive map that would also contain the idea of there being an incentive to hide where we are. Because if it were true, it would mean that there are many more continents, as evidenced by the other spots on the moon that don't correspond to continents that we know of.
Sound plenty crazy. Okay. I've got a question from Geistview that's a little yeah, I'll just read it. He says, Tim, why did you fake being Mark Sargent at the city council meeting?
Oh, that was actually, it was a group decision. It was sort of an interesting troll in a way, but it was this. When the topic started, we assumed, well, if there's anything to it, it's probably going to be led by people with vested interest in containing it. And at the same time, we wanted the question to kind of blow up. I didn't have a channel that was substantial. And if there was anyone who had a grasp on the basics of the question, it would be Sargent. So we use that as sort of a shout out to direct people to his channel. So it's sort of a channel to channel shout out in the early days of this discussion. And again, it was because we couldn't say Eric Dubay, because Eric Dubay, even though he does a lot of interesting work in this topic, he reads a lot of those books as audiobooks, like the Robotham work. But when you get Dubay, you also get Nazis, and you get anti-Semitic conspiracies, and you get
Yeah.
other stuff that I think totally takes away from the basic question.
Mark is at least pretty nice guy. What I can tell.
Have you interviewed him?
I have not. I keep asking him. He doesn't respond to my emails.
He's done 394 interviews, 394, I think. And every interview starts off with, how did you find the flat earth?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, there's how many people want to know that in 2021?
Yeah.
You should.
All right. In 20 minutes, I'm debating Schrodinger's cat on the proper plurality of Karens, a group of Karens. So I need to be time sensitive to time here. And I have another question from Geistview. Um, it's a little more aggressive than the last one. Says Tim, why did you put daughters of people you don't like
Wait, that's the one I
faces?
told you. That's the one. Look, Marcus Goldfinch. I'll just say his name because I'm suing him. I've got trolls like you wouldn't believe. I've got cyber squatters. You can look it up. Look up Tim Osman cyber squatter, and that will lead you.
This isn't
Yes,
the same.
it's all part of the same aggregate of content. So, you want to talk to me about that personally, call me up. My phone's open by all means. But yes, I do have a lot of haters who over the years have purchased dozens of domains, 40 in fact. I could name them, all intended to steal traffic, drive traffic. So no, not interested in forwarding black propaganda, but if you want to talk about it privately, by all means.
So you did not.
Nothing. No, I have nothing, like I'm saying emphatically, I have nothing to do with these claims. And these claims are made so it's like, well, for example, this person made a death threat or something. They make these claims where it just makes you sound, it's a smear. You know how these work. So no, I'm not going to address it directly unless you can provide a source for me. Like email me, we'll talk about it.
I think he's talking about a video that's on your channel.
I don't have any video. I don't know what he's talking about, but like I said, email me. But no, we're not addressing troll. I mean, I guess we could address troll content, but as you know, you probably get your share of it. But no, I've got a number of shady characters that, well, it's the internet for you. And when you get into these topics, people just like to
All right. So
do
well,
whatever they can.
I'll finish the what he said, and then I'll encourage him to ask you personally or call you. He says did the daughter do something to you? Death threats and $5,000 extortion. So is that not you? Is that somebody else?
I don't, that's not me. And no, that's what I'm saying. This is all a character, very well identified, very well known. This character filed 400 false DMCA copyright takedown strikes against my channel. It's a matter of record. I sued YouTube in small claims to get their attention because I had so many false DMCA takedowns of my channels. I've had 100 plus YouTube channels. So, you can find plenty of haters and trolls if you want, but no, I tend not to address that because I would rather focus on the substance of the topics rather than delving into just pure ad hominem. And that's, I think it's the most productive thing. I mean, would you not agree?
I do tend to avoid the drama and trolling, but it happens. So all right, there you go, Geist View. Indy Tiger says Yo-Yo D-spin device didn't Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century retrieve that from Marvin the Martian. The Yo-Yo D-spin, I think he did. Toby for €5 says Tim Osman, what happened to you that made you the way it did? Why overthink unnecessary things so much? Don't you just want to enjoy life in a simple way?
I can understand that. I was watching a Netflix series called Dark Matter. It's all science fiction. We watched them all back to back, binge watched, and I actually really did enjoy it. I do like science fiction, and if this whole thing were real, heliocentrism, the ball, I love it. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I don't agree with the idea that the heliocentric system means that man is insignificant, that we're just a meaningless thing in a giant cosmos that is full of chaos and nothing matters. Like, I don't agree with that. I think it's sublimely beautiful if it is indeed the way it's been described by mainstream science and the way it's portrayed in the movies and comics and all that stuff. I just don't happen to believe it right now. But nothing happened to me. I wasn't hit on the head or anything. And if you showed me the right piece of evidence, I would be in complete agreement with you on everything else.
Sure. Okay. Um, Connell Silverfur says paranoia commonly persists amongst conspiracy nuts. Are you paranoid, Tim?
I work against paranoia. I work against, I actually try actively to debunk things that we shouldn't fear. I think I might have coined the term vaxophobe. I feel like there's a lot of things out there that sell because fear sells. Sex sells, but fear sells. And I'm not paranoid. I'm not worried. Like, I'm not the one who's going to put a helmet on for space junk, but you are. When the same authorities that told you to mask up tell you to helmet up, you're probably going to do it. Am I right?
No, not putting on a helmet. In fact, I ride my bike without a helmet. The man is not going to make me wear a helmet riding a bike.
You're going to have some helmet Karen telling you to helmet up because you're setting a bad example for her kids. So
I have seen them. The helmet Karens exist. That was before they were called Karens, but yeah, exactly. All right. Connell Silverfer again. He says Tim Ozman has just stated he doesn't trust himself. That was a while ago. It might have been about looking at the ISS through a camera and transiting the moon or something like that.
Oh, look, I'm ready to admit that I'm wrong. I mean, eyewitness testimony, we know memories, a lot of these things. We're not always reliable witnesses in every way. And I think it's very important to use logic and to be very discriminating about what claims you accept. Like you admitted that you've never seen the ISS, but you feel comfortable proclaiming you have. I won't be comfortable proclaiming that until I
didn't
have.
proclaim I have.
Well, but
I feel comfortable accepting that it exists because the amount of evidence that is that I've looked at confirms that.
Would you have a bet? Like would you bet $200 that, like between you and I, a wager, just let's say an amount, $200, that I could spot it before you could? Like if we started tonight and the mission was to spot the ISS and record it, do you think you could spot it before I could?
Oh, that's a good challenge. I don't know. I'm not a betting man. I thought at first it was going to be bet that it exists or not. I'd be like, yeah, I'd take that. But I mean,
it'd be an incentive because I would do it. You would have an advantage.
I think it's random because whether or not you can see it in your location is a challenge, right? So
interesting. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to make an attempt. I really am. I mean, I don't want to be entirely dismissive and I don't want to make arguments from ignorance, but even if I see it, it doesn't necessarily do away with a lot of the issues that I have with the space station. But again, that's really not your specialty, as you've been explaining. You're more about what's on the ground. And yeah, I don't think that there is a flat Earth model. I think that there is a question here that has yet to be answered, and it's not going to go away anytime soon unless NASA can do something a little more convincing, I think, than what they have been doing. I'm not convinced.
What would you take and not move the goalpost?
Okay, yeah, let's start there. What would I take and not move the goalpost? Okay, so I would want to see a selfie from the outside of the space station, I guess, a selfie with the Earth moving behind them for more than, I would say, well, actually, I'd want to see the whole Earth. That's the whole problem. They can't show you the whole Earth. So let me go ahead and, because they've shown us some things, but they don't show us anything continuous. And the last thing I saw was Victor Glover's, and he showed us part of the ball and flipped it. Like, I want to see the whole thing. Like, is that too much to ask? Like in one shot, handheld camera, show me top to bottom. I want to see the whole ball. Like, is that?
So yeah, you're asking for something. They have to go farther than the ISS, right? So when they go to the moon and when they come back, then that's the next opportunity. Because you want a person to do it, not the Discover satellite, or not the Himawari 8 satellite, or not the goes east or goes west satellite. You need a person to do it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess that would be my goalpost, and I would stick with that. I would stick with that for sure. I don't see any reason that they couldn't have already have demonstrated this. I'm not convinced by anything they've shown us thus far. And again, the space station's a huge jalopy if it really exists. I think it's kind of a joke. Okay. But we can agree to disagree on that one. That's not an argument against it.
All right. Toby says, "Don't read this super chat out loud, but Brainy Beaver rocks." So, Toby, I won't read that out loud. Justin, with the Greek last name I can't pronounce. If a group of crazy people band together and become the new normal, does the rest of society deemed normal become the abnormal to the group? I think so.
Is that what you're trying to stop? Like a flat Earth majority would somehow cancel out?
No, I don't think that the majority could become flat earthers. No. I think it takes a particular mindset to be a flat earther. All right. Connell Silverfer Says UFO doesn't mean alien. That's a straw man. That's true. It just means they don't know what it is. They haven't identified it yet. So UFO becomes an IFO should they identify it. Right? Cretan Ball says, I agree with him about one thing. Some people are definitely divorced from reality. Yes. I think we all know somebody. I think we all maybe have family members that are divorced from reality, don't we?
Well, look, here's something though to consider. Look, okay, because when somebody's divorced from reality, they don't know the difference. But for the most part, people who are positing that this news story is fake or this scientific achievement is fake science, they tend to know the mainstream view and the other view, and they're rejecting one of them. So there is a big difference, I think, in the conspiratorial mindset, as you call it. I would call it the radical skeptic who shifted the burden of proof back to the mainstream media. But it's a philosophical problem. And I would say that if anybody's divorced from reality, it's actually the mainstream conditioned mind. And so no offense, but I don't take offense when people say that I'm divorced from reality.
I've already received the link to go to Schrodinger Cat's channel. So I gotta catch up on these. Cool. So I'm gonna have to ask to not have a response to these ones. So, and the next one's a question just for you. Maybe you can address it later. Ask the Flurf how the angle of polaris equals your latitude, but each 5-degree arc length is a different distance. Wouldn't a flat Earth be equal spaced? The geometry certainly doesn't work there. So Brandon Toy says it's not by claim. After using the transit of the ISS as evidence for an hour, Brandon Toy is a flat earther. So yes, Brandon, come on here. Let's talk about it sometime. Rodent No Last Name says that's not how it works. Facepalm. Thank you. And Connell Silverfur again says X-Files theme intensifies. Tim, did you like the X-Files? Did you?
I did. I don't think they went far. They didn't go far enough. They didn't go far enough. But hey, this has been great. I want to get you in touch with Quincy Carr.
Yes.
He is a great guy to talk to. I think you'll like him. He is a pilot, and maybe you can challenge his presuppositions. He has interesting views. I can't speak for him, but he's had some interesting things to say when he's called in on my program.
I'd love to talk to him. So, okay. Toby says, poor guy, I hope one day he breaks his delusions. I think people are kind of liking you, Tim. Steve 1759 says, if NASA faked everything, explain Apollo 1 Challenger and Columbia 17 crew members. I do not, Tim, address those because I know what you're going to say. I don't like.
I dealt with that before, and that's not even that's not even a relevant question to this, but I know where you're going with that one, and that's one of the problems with this topic. We get into these other areas and it gets inflammatory, and I'm trying to stay away from fake news and staying to just the fake science.
Yeah. Okay. I've never seen such behavior in the war room before. Says, why does the Earth have two celestial poles according to the globe model? Do you agree that there are two celestial poles at least?
Well, that would be the argument in favor of the globe. Unless
do they exist though? Can people observe them?
Oh, I have people on my Twitter feed who constantly send them to me all the time. Yes, they exist.
Okay. Holy Smalls says, if we allow it can be faked, it is fake until proven to be true. Then Tim could be fake. So he's fake until proven to be real. Tim, you're fake now.
It's only with extraordinary claims. Regular claims
but
that
Tim,
don't have that
your
big bird.
Claims are the most extraordinary. Come on.
What, the underground Mars bases?
Yeah. All right. Mike Billars, this is a good one here, I think. He says, herp derp derp, flurf zerp zerp gerp, burp de burp slurp perp. Do you agree or disagree?
I don't speak globe speak. Is that what that is? That's a certain dialect? I don't have that one, no.
Mike Billars, that is, the glove has been thrown down. Lissom says, why do I have to account? He's a pilot here. Why do I have to account for the globe to do something as simple as calculating my flight distances? Oh, wait, it's because the Earth is a globe. There is, yes, if the Earth were flat, then we would use either the Pythagoras Pythagorean theorem or the polar distance formula to calculate distances for flights. But we use the Haversine formula, which is a spherical trigonometry function.
Now, do you believe that people on commercial flights are high enough to see a curve?
Not from the small windows out the side, no.
Because so many people will say they've seen the curve. So that shows you bias confirmation on the globe Earth side, does it not?
Totally agree. Yeah, and when I hear people say you could look out a plane window, I'm like, oh, don't do that.
Okay, see, that's a great point because yeah, there's bias confirmation on both sides, and that's why I think this conversation should exist and should be followed through. I wish there were more people who would be planning expeditions uh, to go to the edge, but like I said, I'm behind Mark Gold and whoever he gets to go to Virgin Galactic. So I've been proactive from the beginning in getting behind people who are trying to actually go get more information.
You can, like I did, you can measure the dip of the horizon using a theodolite app on your phone. I did that. And so you can see the effect of the curve, but you can't see a left to right curve. So let's see, Corntech. Corn is spelled with a K, like the band. He says, your facial expressions sell it, dear sir. Tim talks nicely compared to other flat earth people, but speaking softly and well doesn't equal credibility. Yes. Rob Parks says, do you believe professional astronomers, not NASA employees, are lying or factually incorrect, Tim?
Well, I think if their starting point is wrong, or if they're starting off in the wrong point, everything is going to follow that. But no, I think that the nature of this thing is such that the individual astronomer wouldn't have any reason, I don't think. I mean, really, the model that we're given makes sense, unless you are open to the possibility that, yes, they're lying to us. And the only way that you could validate that, of course, would be to go deep, deep south and prove more land or an edge. And no one's been there. And that's one of the things that I always found to be peculiar about the conference-based flat earthers is that they were always averse to talking about the edge. I would say they're edge averse. And I'm like, shouldn't that be your number one question? If you're the guy that discovered the dome, then you should go over there and take a chunk of that dome glass. But I never see that fervor to go explore.
They just hand wave and say you can't go there. And it's the treaty, even though the treaty doesn't say that. So, all right. Okay. K-Bear, this one comes and goes, says, do you drink pee?
Oh, what is that? I don't know how that even got associated with this topic. I saw your last video, and Dave Murphy in that video Level, if you look at the subtitle, Level, the truth is hard to swallow. And then they show David Murphy, and I'm like, oh, is this a joke? Did Eric Dubay play some sick joke on flat earthers, or was he serious with that?
Yeah. One more super chat, and that's it. It says Atlas 6355 says Jeranism recorded ISS transiting the sun. Deny that. And Atlas, I will say that Tim Ozman is no fan of Jeranism. Let me say one more thing here. Jordan Sweet had a tragedy in his family. He says, hey man, can you do me a favor? Before you sign off, remind everyone to hug their loved ones for me. So there you go. From Jordan, hug your loved ones. Tim, I gotta go. Anything you'd like to say before we wrap this up?
No, I really think that what else can we really say? I want to reassess this later. I'm interested in following through with maybe a bet on or a race to find the ISS, but I'm gonna have to listen to this again. I mean, the whole topic, as you know, is it's a train wreck of a topic, and it has to do, I believe, with trust in establishment media and science and what it means when you can't trust it and where we might actually be versus where they say we are. But we don't all have the same questions, but I don't think we're crazy for asking. And those answers will be forthcoming sooner or later anyway. So I think it's a win-win situation for everybody participating as long as we're having fun and having these talks and not immediately going into character assassination mode. So I appreciate you having me on and your people in the chat being somewhat nice to most people in the chat, my chat.
Thank you, Tim. It's been good. We've been trying to do this a year and a half, I think. So it's been good to have you on. Everybody, I will be on Schrodinger's Cat channel in just a minute. If somebody wants to drop that link in there. And Tim, if you send me your channel, I'll put it in the description here. So everybody, thanks a lot, and we'll see you later.